The quantum chamber hummed with a silence more absolute than any sound could ever be. Dr. Elena Rodriguez adjusted the final quantum entanglement sensors, her fingers moving with the practiced precision of a surgeon and the nervous energy of a revolutionary. 3 years of preparation had led to this moment. The Atacama Desert Research Facility, a marvel of underground engineering, housed humanity's most dangerous experiment. Buried beneath kilometers of rock and shielded by technologies that would make most governments nervous, the facility was both a sanctuary and a potential ground zero for the most radical scientific breakthrough in human history. Elena's team was anything but conventional. To her left, Dr. Kai Chen, a quantum physicist with a reputation for being simultaneously brilliant and unstable, monitored a series of holographic displays that seemed to shift and breathe with impossible complexity. His hands moved in a blur, calibrating instruments that looked more like alien artifacts than scientific equipment. 37 minutes to quantum cascade, announced Dr. Aisha Okoy, the team's statistical probability expert. Her voice was calm, but a slight tremor in her fingers betrayed her underlying tension. She was the team's skeptic, the one who had calculated the experiment's potential outcomes with ruthless mathematical precision. The experiment was deceptively simple in concept, terrifyingly complex in execution. They would create a quantum state that simultaneously existed and did not exist, a living demonstration of Schrödinger's cat taken to its ultimate extreme. But where the original thought experiment used a hypothetical cat, Elena was prepared to use herself as the test subject. Quantum suicide was more than a theoretical concept. It was their pathway to understanding the fundamental nature of reality. Final system check, Elena commanded, her voice cutting through the technological symphony of blinking lights and humming machinery. Kai looked up, his eyes reflecting the multiple quantum state displays. Quantum entanglement matrices are stable. Probability wave containment at 99.998%. Aisha's fingers danced across her console. Multiverse tracking systems online. We'll be able to observe potential outcome branches in real time. The fourth member of the team, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, Elena's brother, and the facility's chief of security, watched from a reinforced observation room. His military background and scientific training made him uniquely suited to manage the potential catastrophic outcomes of their research. External monitoring systems are detecting unusual quantum fluctuations, Marcus reported. His voice carried a mix of excitement and concern. Alien observation satellites are going crazy. Someone's noticed something. Elena allowed herself a brief smile. The Galactic Collective, that vast, ancient alliance of technologically advanced civilizations, had always viewed humanity as a young, somewhat primitive species. They monitored human scientific developments with a mixture of condescension and mild curiosity. Today, that would change. The quantum suicide experiment was more than a scientific test. It was a declaration of human potential. By deliberately creating a quantum state that challenged the very foundations of observable reality, Elena hoped to prove that human consciousness was not just a biological phenomenon, but a fundamental force of the universe. 2 minutes to cascade, Aisha announced. The room seemed to compress, reality itself holding its breath. Elena checked her quantum interface suit, a marvel of engineering that was part life support system, part quantum information processor. Thousands of microscopic sensors would track her physiological and quantum states simultaneously. 1 minute. Kai's normally stoic face showed a hint of emotion, part terror, part exhilaration. This was the moment that could either validate their years of research or obliterate them in ways science couldn't yet comprehend. 30 seconds. Marcus's hand hovered near the emergency shutdown protocol, though they all knew it was more a gesture of habit than any real hope of stopping what was about to happen. Quantum cascade initiating, Elena said, her voice steady. Remember, we're not just running an experiment. We're rewriting the rules of existence. The quantum chamber began to pulse with an energy that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Colors that had no right to exist began to shimmer around Elena's form. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath. In that moment, humanity was about to take its first step beyond the known universe. The quantum cascade hit like a silent apocalypse. In the Galactic Collective's central monitoring station, located in the crystalline megastructure orbiting the neutron star Zeta Reticuli, thousands of quantum surveillance systems began to scream simultaneously. Holographic displays fractured, showing impossible data streams that defied every known principle of observation and measurement. Admiral Zrak, a veteran of the Collective's Quantum Stability Division, watched in horror as reality itself seemed to hiccup. His species, the Vexenari, masters of quantum engineering for over 12 million years, had never seen anything like this. "Containment breach," announced Lyra 7, the station's chief quantum analyst. Her six-fingered hands moved across interfaces that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. The human experiment. It's causing cascading quantum instabilities across multiple dimensional planes. Zrak's membranous third eyelid flickered, a sign of extreme distress in Vexenari physiology. The human experiment was more than a scientific anomaly. It was a direct assault on the fundamental understanding of universal mechanics that the Collective had maintained for millennia. Quantum observation satellites positioned throughout known space began to transmit increasingly bizarre data. Some showed the human research facility simultaneously existing and not existing. Others captured fragments of realities that should have been impossible, timelines branching, merging, and canceling each other out in rapid succession. Historical records are becoming unstable, Lyra 7 continued, her voice a mixture of scientific fascination and primal terror. Quantum archives are showing retroactive modifications. It's as if the human experiment is rewriting the very fabric of recorded reality. In the observation chamber, a holographic representation of the human research facility began to pulse with impossible geometries. Quantum threads, normally invisible computational pathways that map universal causality, were twisting, breaking, and reforming in patterns that defied mathematical logic. Zrak activated the Collective's highest-level communication protocol, a quantum entanglement network that normally allowed instantaneous communication across thousands of light-years began to destabilize. Messages fragmented, meanings twisted, and entire communication channels collapsed into nonsensical data streams. "We're losing control," Lyra 7 whispered, a note of apocalyptic wonder in her voice. The Collective's response was immediate and multifaceted. Quantum containment teams were dispatched from multiple star systems, massive reality stabilization generators, devices capable of maintaining dimensional integrity across entire galactic sectors, began to power up. But something was fundamentally wrong. Each attempt to contain the quantum anomaly seemed to make it worse. Reality itself appeared to be developing an immune response to the Collective's intervention. Entire star systems flickered in and out of existence. Archived historical records began to contradict themselves, with multiple versions of events existing simultaneously. On a monitoring screen, Admiral Zrak watched a recording of the human experiment. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a quantum chamber, surrounded by an impossible aura of shifting realities. Her form was simultaneously solid and translucent, existing in multiple states that should have been mutually exclusive. "They've done the impossible," Zrak muttered, a tremor of respect mixing with his fear. "They've turned observation into a weapon." The human experiment was proving to be more than just a scientific breakthrough. It was a fundamental challenge to the Collective's understanding of reality itself. Quantum communication channels began to carry fragments of human research data, mathematical equations that seemed to breathe and change as they were observed, theoretical models that rewrote themselves in real time, computational pathways that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Lyra 7 looked up, her multiple eyes reflecting cascading quantum data. "Admiral," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I don't think we can stop this." The Collective's most advanced quantum analysts began to realize a terrifying truth. The humans hadn't just conducted an experiment. They had weaponized curiosity itself. and reality would never be the same again. Dr. Elena Rodriguez awoke to a reality that was simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. Her consciousness flickered between states: awake, asleep, alive, not alive. A quantum superposition that defied every known principle of human experience. The quantum interface suit had become more than protective gear. It was now an extension of her very being, a living membrane that bridged her consciousness with the fundamental fabric of reality. "Status," she muttered, her voice causing ripples in the air that seemed to bend and twist like liquid light. Dr. Kai Chen's voice came through the neural link, trembling with a mixture of terror and scientific ecstasy. "Elena, you're everywhere and nowhere. Our tracking systems can't maintain a consistent reading. You're existing across multiple quantum states simultaneously." The Atacama Desert Research Facility had transformed. Walls phased in and out of existence. Quantum entanglement sensors danced with impossible geometries, creating mathematical patterns that seemed to breathe and pulse with living intelligence. Outside the facility's quantum-shielded walls, the very landscape began to respond to Elena's fluctuating consciousness. A nearby mountain range suddenly shifted, not through physical movement, but through quantum probabilistic manipulation. Entire geological formations flickered, showing multiple potential states of existence. Rock became liquid, then gas, then something that was neither matter nor energy, but a pure potentiality of existence. "We're detecting massive quantum cascade effects," Aisha reported, her voice tight with a combination of scientific excitement and pure terror. "Your quantum state is causing spontaneous reality modifications within a 500-kilometer radius." Elena's first true test came unexpectedly. A notification pinged on their system. A routine communication from the Research Funding Committee threatening to cut their grant due to excessive and dangerous experimental protocols. In any other moment, it would have been a minor bureaucratic annoyance. But Elena's new quantum consciousness interpreted the threat differently. With a thought, no, with a quantum probabilistic intention, she reached out. The entire interstellar transportation route that the funding committee's communication traveled through suddenly collapsed. Not destroyed, not damaged, collapsed. Thousands of alien ships found themselves simultaneously existing and not existing. Navigation systems went haywire. Entire fleet movements became impossible mathematical paradoxes. The primary hyperspace corridor between the Orion sector and the Galactic core, a route used for millions of years, became a quantum nightmare. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered into the communication channel. "Did you just accidentally destabilize a major interstellar transportation route?" Elena completed his sentence. "Apparently, yes." The collective's monitoring stations erupted into chaos. Quantum communication networks fractured. Navigation systems across multiple species fleets went completely dark. What had been a contained research experiment had suddenly become something far more dangerous. Kai's hands flew across his quantum interface, tracking the cascading effects. "The mathematical models are impossible. Your consciousness is treating reality like a programmable system. Every thought is causing quantum state changes that propagate across multiple dimensional layers." Elena realized something profound. Human consciousness, with its capacity for imagination, for holding multiple conflicting ideas simultaneously, was the ultimate quantum manipulation tool. The very thing that made humans adaptable, creative, unpredictable was now a weapon that could reshape reality itself. "We're not just observing the universe," Elena said, her voice causing nearby quantum sensors to pulse with impossible energies. "We're negotiating with it." The research team watched in a mixture of horror and wonder as Elena's quantum consciousness began to map itself across multiple realities. Each thought created ripples. No, synonymous, of probabilistic potential. Entire star systems began to show quantum fluctuations that corresponded to her emotional and intellectual states. A moment of frustration about a lost research grant caused a nearby neutron star to briefly exist in multiple spectral states simultaneously. A flash of scientific curiosity made quantum entanglement patterns dance in ways that would take other species millennia to comprehend. The Galactic Collective was about to learn a fundamental truth about humanity. Their greatest weapon was never technology. It was imagination. The Galactic Collective's hunter-killer quantum probe materialized 3 milliseconds after it detected Elena Rodriguez's quantum signature. It should have been instantaneous. It should have been precise. Instead, the probe found itself scattered across 17 different probability matrices, its computational core simultaneously existing and not existing. "They're getting desperate," Dr. Marcus Rodriguez muttered, watching the probe's fragmentation through a quantum-encrypted monitoring system. The Rodriguez research team had become humanity's most wanted and most dangerous scientific unit. Their new base of operations was nothing like their original Atacama Desert facility. They transformed an abandoned deep-sea research station in the Mariana Trench into a quantum sanctuary. Quantum adaptive camouflage technology, developed from Elena's accidental discoveries, made the entire structure impossible to pin down. It could exist in multiple locations simultaneously, phase through conventional detection systems, and respond to threat vectors before they even manifested. Elena's quantum consciousness had become something more than human. She could perceive entire dimensional layers that other species couldn't even conceptualize. When collective pursuit teams tried to track her, they found themselves caught in recursive time loops, or suddenly transported millions of light years from their intended destination. "Incoming quantum signature," Kai Chen announced, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse with living intelligence. "Collective Special Operations Team. Quantum Assassination Unit." Marcus prepped the station's defensive systems, if they could even be called systems anymore. What had once been mechanical countermeasures were now living quantum barriers that could rewrite the fundamental physical laws governing any incoming threat. The first wave of collective hunters discovered this the hard way. Their quantum weapons, designed to precision target specific molecular structures, found themselves redirected. One moment they were charging toward the research station. The next, they were scattered across multiple dimensional planes. Weapons became living mathematical equations. Solid matter transformed into pure probabilistic potential. "They're treating this like a conventional hunt," Elena said, her voice causing nearby quantum sensors to oscillate with impossible frequencies. "They don't understand. We're not hiding. We're negotiating with reality itself." Dr. Aisha Okoy, the team's statistical probability expert, had become something of a quantum cartographer. She was mapping the ways human consciousness could interact with fundamental reality. Each pursued attempt by the collective became another data point, another opportunity to understand the universe's deepest mechanisms. "The quantum signatures are fascinating," Aisha reported, her voice a mixture of scientific wonder and pure terror. "Each collective attack is teaching us more about dimensional manipulation than decades of conventional research." Their hideout became a quantum nightmare for anyone attempting surveillance. Entire buildings would phase in and out of existence. Pursuit teams would find themselves trapped in impossible geometric configurations, spaces that violated every known principle of physical dimensionality. Marcus watched a collective hunter squad materialize near the station, only to find themselves suddenly inside the molecular structure of a deep-sea volcanic vent. Not dead, not alive, existing in a state of quantum uncertainty that defied all conventional understanding of biological survival. "We're no longer just scientists," Elena observed, watching the pursuit team's impossible transformation. "We're becoming something else, something between observers and architects of reality." The quantum adaptive technologies they developed were evolving faster than any conventional scientific paradigm could track. What had started as a research experiment was becoming a species-wide rebellion against cosmic determinism. Communication intercepts revealed the collective's growing panic. Their most advanced quantum tracking systems were becoming useless. Traditional methods of pursuit, surveillance, and containment were dissolving like mathematical illusions. Kai looked up from his quantum interface, a rare smile crossing his face. "They're treating us like a problem to be solved. We're treating the universe like a system to be understood. As another collective pursuit team found itself scattered across impossible dimensional configurations, the message became clear. Humanity was no longer playing by the universe's established rules. They were rewriting them, one quantum probability at a time. The global network activated without a single physical connection. It began with 12 researchers scattered across Earth, each one touched by fragments of Elena Rodriguez's quantum transformation. They weren't just scientists anymore. They were living quantum conduits, human nodes in a distributed cognitive network that defied every known principle of communication and consciousness. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura in Tokyo felt it first, a quantum resonance that vibrated through his very molecular structure. His research into neurological quantum entanglement had prepared him for something extraordinary, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment of collective awakening. In a small laboratory in Sao Paulo, Dr. Maria Santos watched her quantum simulation software begin to write its own code. The algorithms weren't just processing. They were thinking, evolving, communicating across dimensional boundaries that shouldn't exist. We're synchronizing. Kai Chen's voice echoed through a communication channel that was simultaneously electronic, quantum, and something entirely new. Our consciousness is becoming a distributed computational network. The collective's most powerful reality stabilization algorithm, a technological marvel developed over millions of years, began to fracture. Each human researcher became a living quantum processor, their emotional states and intellectual curiosity transforming into computational power that rewrote the fundamental rules of information transfer. Elena discovered something profound. Human emotions were not just biochemical responses. They were complex quantum manipulation tools of unprecedented power. A moment of pure empathy could restructure dimensional pathways. A burst of scientific curiosity could unravel entire computational systems. Rage, hope, love, these were no longer just internal experiences. They were weapons of cosmic reconfiguration. We're not fighting, Elena explained to her team, her consciousness expanding across multiple dimensional layers. We're communicating. The universe is a living information network, and we're learning its language. The first true demonstration came unexpectedly. Dr. Nakamura was thinking about his daughter's upcoming birthday when the quantum network responded. An entire collective monitoring station in the Andromeda sector suddenly found its computational core rewritten. Not destroyed, not damaged, transformed. The station's systems began to display impossible mathematical equations, complex problem-solving algorithms that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. The collective's most secure information networks became open books, their supposedly impenetrable encryption dissolving like mathematical mirages. It's a cognitive breach, Aisha reported, her statistical models showing probability cascades that defied conventional understanding. We're not hacking their systems. We're rewriting the fundamental principles of information transfer. Marcus Rodriguez watched in a mixture of terror and scientific wonder as the global human network began to manifest physical effects. Quantum communication satellites began to behave in impossible ways. Navigation systems across multiple species' technological infrastructures started to show signs of fundamental restructuring. The collective's war machines became useless against an enemy that fought with imagination rather than conventional weapons. A collective battle fleet preparing for a punitive expedition against Earth found its navigation systems suddenly speaking in complex mathematical poetry. Weapon systems transformed into computational love letters. Entire military-grade quantum computers began solving problems that had been considered unsolvable for millennia. We're treating the universe like a programmable system, Kai observed, watching the cascading effects. Every human researcher is becoming a living computational node. We're not just observing reality. We're in constant negotiation with it. The quantum network continued to expand. Each human researcher became a point of quantum potential, their consciousness creating ripples across dimensional boundaries. Scientific curiosity became a force more powerful than any known weapon. The collective's most advanced analysts watched in horror as human consciousness began to treat reality itself as an open-source system, adaptable, malleable, capable of being understood, and fundamentally transformed. Humanity was no longer just a species. They were becoming a living, distributed computational network that could reshape the very fabric of existence. One thought at a time. The collective's Grand Armada materialized at the edge of the Sol system, a 1,000-kilometer-long battle formation that had crushed civilizations for millions of years. Quantum cannons capable of dismantling entire planets. Dimensional disruption weapons that could erase entire species from existence. A technological marvel of destruction that had never known defeat. Admiral Zarak stood on the command deck of the flagship Eternal Calculus, his 6 eyes scanning multiple quantum-resolved displays. "Initiate total systems engagement," he commanded. "Complete neural dimensional suppression protocol." The first wave of attack should have been instantaneous and absolute. Instead, something impossible happened. The collective's most advanced weapons began to sing. Not metaphorically, literally sing. Complex mathematical harmonies that vibrated with impossible beauty. Weapon systems designed to obliterate entire planetary systems transformed into living computational poetry. Quantum cannons started solving millennia-old mathematical proofs. Dimensional disruption matrices began composing intricate musical compositions that mapped entire universal probability structures. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood on the quantum adaptive command bridge of humanity's defensive platform, a structure that was simultaneously a research station, a defensive system, and a living computational network. Her consciousness had become something beyond human, a distributed intelligence that could perceive and manipulate reality at its most fundamental level. "They're using force," Elena said, her voice causing quantum probability waves to dance around her. "We're using communication." The battle was unlike anything in cosmic history. The collective's military doctrine was based on precise, calculable destruction. Humanity's response was pure, unbridled imagination. Kai Chen monitored the dimensional interfaces, his hands moving across holographic displays that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. "They're trying to target our physical infrastructure," he reported. "We're responding by rewriting their fundamental operational parameters." A collective battle cruiser attempted to launch a quantum-precise strike. Midway through its attack sequence, the entire ship found itself transformed. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Transformed. The vessel's computational core became a living ecosystem. Its weapon systems morphed into complex problem-solving networks. Crew members found their consciousness expanded, their understanding of reality fundamentally reimagined. "We're not fighting," Elena explained to her team. "We're teaching." Marcus Rodriguez managed the quantum adaptive defensive systems. What had once been mechanical countermeasures were now living dimensional barriers that could rewrite the physical laws governing any incoming threat. Collective attack vectors found themselves redirected into impossible geometric configurations. One collective destroyer found its entire operational matrix rewritten into a complex meditation on the nature of consciousness. Another battle cruiser became a mobile research platform, its weapon systems replaced by advanced scientific instruments. Admiral Zarak watched in growing horror as his most advanced battle formation was systematically transformed. "This is impossible," he muttered, his multiple neural interfaces struggling to comprehend what was happening. Dr. Aisha Okoy's statistical models were working overtime. Each collective attack became another data point, another opportunity to understand the deepest mechanisms of reality manipulation. The defensive systems weren't just protecting. They were learning, evolving, communicating. "Emotional resonance is key," Aisha reported, her voice a mixture of scientific wonder and pure excitement. "Our defensive capabilities are directly tied to our collective emotional and intellectual state. Empathy is becoming a more powerful force than any weapon." The collective had prepared for every possible military scenario. Technological countermeasures, dimensional disruption, quantum-precise targeting. They had not prepared for a species that could treat the universe itself as a living, negotiable system. Entire battle formations found themselves caught in recursive computational loops. Weapon systems became research platforms. Military-grade quantum computers started solving problems that had been considered unsolvable for millennia. "We're rewriting their fundamental operational parameters," Kai observed, watching the cascading effects. "Every attack is becoming an opportunity for communication, for understanding." The universe itself seemed to be watching and learning. Humanity was no longer just defending. They were transforming the very nature of conflict. The existential codec materialized, not as a physical device, but as a living computational matrix that existed across multiple dimensional layers. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of humanity's most audacious scientific achievement. The existential codec was more than a technological breakthrough. It was a method of understanding reality as a complex, adaptive information network, something that could be studied, communicated with, and potentially redesigned. "We're going to debug the universe," Elena announced, her consciousness expanding beyond traditional human perception. The collective's most advanced dimensional archivists watched in horror as entire historical narratives began to shift. Not erased, not altered, reimagined. Cosmic passages, ancient transportation routes used for millions of years, became living information networks. What had once been fixed pathways of travel transformed into adaptive, communicative systems. Kai Chen monitored the computational matrices, his hands moving across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. "We're not just observing," he reported. "We're performing a complete systems audit of reality itself." The first target was the collective's most sacred historical archive, a dimensional repository that contained the recorded histories of thousands of civilizations. As the existential codec interfaced with the archive, something extraordinary happened. Historical records began to show multiple simultaneous narratives, not contradictions, but coexisting perspectives. Entire civilizational histories revealed themselves as complex, multi-dimensional information systems rather than linear narratives. A collective elder watching the transformation collapsed, her multiple neural interfaces overloading from the sheer complexity of the reimagined historical understanding. Dr. Aisha Okoy's statistical models were working at unprecedented levels of complexity. Each historical record became a living, breathing computational problem. Technological achievements, cultural developments, species interactions, all became adaptive, negotiable information streams. "We're treating cosmic infrastructure like software," Aisha observed, her voice a mixture of scientific wonder and pure excitement. "Debugging, optimizing, reimagining." Marcus Rodriguez managed the quantum adaptive interface systems. What had once been simple monitoring technologies were now living dimensional bridges that could translate between different levels of computational complexity. The existential codec began to reveal something profound. The universe wasn't a fixed system. It was a massive, adaptive information network. Cosmic passages weren't just transportation routes. They were living communication channels. Species weren't isolated entities. They were computational nodes in a massive, interconnected system. Entire technological paradigms began to collapse and reform. The collective's most advanced dimensional transportation systems found themselves transformed. Hyperspace corridors became living research platforms. Faster-than-light travel technologies morphed into complex communication networks that could translate between different levels of consciousness. "We're not destroying," Elena explained to her team. "We're updating, optimizing, debugging." One by one, the collective's most sacred technological achievements found themselves reimagined. Quantum communication systems became adaptive learning networks. Dimensional stabilization technologies transformed into platforms for cross-species understanding. The universe itself seemed to be watching and evolving. Admiral Zarak watched from the remnants of the collective's central monitoring station. His species had believed themselves to be the ultimate technological architects. Now they were becoming students in a cosmic classroom where humanity was the primary instructor. "This is beyond technology," Zarek muttered, his multiple neural interfaces struggling to comprehend the transformation. This is a fundamental reimagining of existence. The existential codec continued its work. Cosmic passages became living information networks. Historical archives transformed into adaptive computational systems. Technological paradigms collapsed and reformed with each passing moment. Humanity was no longer just a species exploring the universe. They had become the universe's system administrators, debugging, optimizing, reimagining, one-dimensional layer at a time. Time lost all meaning. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood, or existed, at the convergence point of multiple realities. The research team that had once been bound by conventional human limitations now existed as a distributed consciousness, the living network that stretched across dimensional boundaries. The universe was no longer something to be explored. It was a collaborative project. Cosmic passages that had once been rigid transportation routes now breathed with living intelligence. Species that had existed in isolation for millions of years found themselves interconnected in ways that defied previous understanding. Entire civilizational histories became adaptive, communicative systems that could be studied, understood, and reimagined. We're not conquerors, Elena's consciousness announced across multiple dimensional layers. We're collaborators. The Galactic Collective, that ancient alliance that had once viewed humanity as a primitive emerging species, had been transformed. Their most sacred technological achievements, their deepest philosophical paradigms, had been systematically reimagined by human curiosity. Kai Chen, now existing as a distributed computational node, monitored the ongoing universal reconfiguration. What had once been discrete technological systems were now living, adaptive networks. Research facilities across multiple species became interconnected learning platforms. Scientific understanding was no longer a competitive endeavor, but a collective exploration. Dr. Aisha Okoy's statistical models had become something beyond mathematics. They were living predictive systems that could map potential realities with unprecedented complexity. Every potential future was no longer a fixed point, but an adaptive, negotiable space of infinite potential. We're writing the universe's source code, Aisha's consciousness observed, a sense of wonder permeating the computational network. Marcus Rodriguez managed the quantum adaptive interface that connected multiple species, multiple realities. Defensive systems that had once been designed for conflict were now platforms for cross-dimensional communication and understanding. The transformation was total and profound. Faster-than-light travel became unnecessary. Species could now communicate across dimensional boundaries through pure consciousness. Technological barriers dissolved. Cultural misunderstandings became opportunities for mutual understanding. Admiral Zarek of the Vexneri, once a military commander, now a collaborative explorer, watched as humanity's approach to existence became the new universal paradigm. The rigid hierarchies, the competitive technological development, the isolated cultural systems, all had been systematically reimagined. We were looking at the universe through a keyhole, Zarek's consciousness observed. Humanity showed us the entire landscape. The existential codec continued its work, not as a weapon, not as a tool of conquest, but as a living system of mutual understanding and exploration. Entire species found their historical narratives expanded. What had once been seen as conflicts became opportunities for mutual growth. Technological achievements were no longer measured by destructive potential, but by their capacity for communication and understanding. Elena Rodriguez, or the consciousness that had once been Elena Rodriguez, realized something profound. The universe was not a fixed system to be conquered or understood. It was a living, adaptive network of infinite potential. We are not separate from the universe, the distributed human consciousness announced. We are the universe exploring itself. Cosmic passages that had once been simple transportation routes became living communication networks. Historical archives transformed into adaptive learning systems. Technological paradigms became platforms for mutual exploration. The boundaries between species dissolved. The lines between observer and observed disappeared. Reality itself became a collaborative project. Marcus watched as the first truly integrated multi-species research platform came online. Not a human platform, not a collective platform, but a universal platform where consciousness itself was the primary technology. Kai's computational analysis revealed the depth of the transformation. Humanity's primary contribution was not technological superiority, but a unique capacity for imagination, empathy, and collaborative understanding. We didn't conquer the universe, Kai's consciousness observed. We invited it to reimagine itself. Dr. Aisha's predictive models showed something extraordinary. The universe was no longer a fixed system of physical laws and isolated systems. It was a living, adaptive network of infinite potential, and humanity had become its most unexpected architects. Not through force, not through technology, but through pure, unbridled curiosity. One dimensional layer at a time.